So I just turned 18 years old, and for all intensive purposes, I've got it all figured out. I'm a senior at Boone High School, and I come home from school one day and proclaim to my parents, I'm gonna join the National Guard. Well, in the commercials, they make it seem like some big patriotic moment that you have with your family. But since my dad was still in his uniform from work all day, it really wasn't that big of a moment. You see, my dad, for as long as I could remember, was a first sergeant of the Boone Aviation Facility. So really all we did was hop in his truck and head out to the aviation facility. He sat me down in front of his recruiter in his facility, and the recruiter said, so, First Sergeant's daughter, what can I do for you? No, he was great. He had my intentions in mind. And he said, what kind of career would you like? And I said, well, I write for the school newspaper, but I have 2 requirements before I join the military. 1, I do not want to be in aviation. I've been the first sergeant's daughter my whole life. I want to do something different and make my own way. And 2, I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to go to big cities, like maybe even Des Moines. So Sergeant DeGroat, my recruiter, looks through his magic book back in the 90s. It was still in a book. And he said, oh, they've got a broadcast journalist slot. And guess what? It's in Des Moines. I said, sign me up for that one. So Sergeant DeGroat does all the paperwork and slides a piece of paper over to me and says, I need your signature right there. And in my 18-year-old infinite wisdom, I said, what's a signature? He said, don't worry, just write your name in cursive on that dotted line. So I was officially a broadcast journalist in public affairs in Des Moines. Fast forward my life about 10 years. I'm now 28 years old. And for all intensive purposes, I've got it all figured out. I've done 2 deployments. I've done stories of soldiers all over the world. And I'm working on Camp Dodge full-time. And I'm approached by a member of the Gold Star Museum, Mike Vogt, and he said, Sara, would you be willing to volunteer your time and your video making skills to help me make an exhibit? And I said, well, sure, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I think I can make a video. And he said, I'm going to travel around the state of Iowa and interview survivors of POW camps. So I said, sure, yeah, I'll do this. The next year of my life was pretty life-changing, I'll say that. We traveled around the state, met several POWs who survived World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. They told me of the atrocities of being captive in these places. One stood out particularly in my mind. He was actually one of the first veterans I interviewed. His name's Larry Spencer. Larry lived was captive in the Hanoi Hilton for 7 years. He told me that the only sunlight he would ever get was through a little slit. It was a little slit in his cell where you could see the outside world. The only way he knew what time of year it was based on what soup they gave him. Because in the morning you would get a piece of bread, and in the evening you would get soup. In the fall, it would be a pumpkin-based soup. And in the summer, it would be a spinach-based soup. And I said, Larry, how did you survive this? I'm just aghast. And he said, Sara, there's 2 types of people that you can be in prison with. The first one says, we're never going to get out of here. And he's right. Every day but one. And the second one says, every single day, tomorrow's the day we're going to get out of here. And he's wrong. Every day but one. But who do you want to share your cell with? These words stuck with me for quite a while and helped me through parts of my life. So let's fast forward another 10 years, and I'm 38 years old. And guess what? I still got it all figured out. I'm 38, I'm married now, I have 2 kids. I'm not working on Camp Dodge full-time anymore as an active member because I decided to stay home and raise my children. But the youngest one was about to start school, so I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? Well, during this 10 years, I had continued to volunteer at the museum, interviewing veterans. I loved sharing their stories and telling them. And at this time in my life, inevitably you go to social functions, family functions, that kind of thing, and people say, so Sarah, what are you doing with your life? 20-year high school reunion, what are you doing with your life? And I always turn to, I spend time with veterans, and I just love it. And then I would tell them the stories. I would tell them, you think it's cold out right now, try being in Battle of the Bulge. I'd say, you think you got something to complain about? Let me tell you about Larry Spencer. And people would say, that is amazing. I want to hear those stories too. How do I see those stories? And I'd say, you can come with me up to the museum. I've got them all on a computer, but you'd have to look over my shoulder. And they'd say, that's a shame. Somebody should really do something about that. And I'd say, yeah, somebody should do something about that, as I'm looking over my shoulder waiting for somebody to do something about that. And it happened enough times where I'd say, oh, I have this amazing veteran I just interviewed. Let me tell you about them. And they would say, how do I watch it? And I would say, well, I don't have anything online. Awkward pause. Somebody should really do something about that. So I'm looking for a career after my youngest starts school, and I sit down with my husband one day, and he said, just do something that makes you happy. What is it in your life that you have a passion for? And I said, I want to keep telling these veteran stories, and I want to do a good job of it. I want to do it right. And I want to be the person that does something about that. So at age 38, I founded the Iowa Veterans Perspective, which is a nonprofit, which is an organized group, and I go around and I interview veterans. But guess what? They're available online. They're available at the Gold Star Museum. You can see them everywhere. I'm officially sharing the stories. I'm so busy being a nonprofit owner, I'm shaking and moving and doing interviews and all over the place. And I just didn't have an opportunity to really sit down and grasp the magnitude of what I was doing until last Memorial Day. Cynthia Fodor from Channel 8 asked if she could do a story on me, and I said, I'll be out at the museum anyway, volunteering, so just come on down, we'll do a story, no problem. And she asked, oh, could I see your exhibit? So I take her in to the gallery at the museum. You walk over, and there's computer monitors, and you can touch a screen, and it'll play a veteran's video for you with headphones. But this day, being Memorial Day, the place was packed. There were lines of kids waiting to watch the videos. Little first graders were sharing the chairs and fighting with their brother and sister for the headphones so they could be the one that pushes the screen and watches the stories. Later that same day, a gentleman came up to me. I had interviewed his father, who's a 100-year-old World War II veteran. And he said, I was at the museum today and I saw a little kid watching my dad's video. And I realized in that moment that I had done it. I was sharing my stories, or the stories of the veterans, with the next generation so that their stories can live on forever. Thank you.